This is Earl Purdy. Welcome to a hardcore course in miracles. Welcome to the hardcore course in miracles class with Earl Purdy here on Facebook Live. Welcome, mighty companions. We're going to be talking about the rewards of God. We're going to be talking about the rewards of truth. We're going to be talking about the rewards of love. What are the rewards of truth? What are the rewards of love? What are the rewards of God? That's what we're going to be talking about. What are the rewards of truth? What are the rewards of God? What are the rewards of getting into God? What are the rewards of getting into truth? What are the rewards of getting into love? What are the rewards of God? We're going to be talking about that in the hardcore course in miracles. Yeah, I'm so glad to have you with me right now, mighty companions, gathering online. We have our tribe. Our tribe is coming together. I can see you coming online. And you can interact with each other. You can interact with me. You can make comments. So this is our time together, and it excites me. And it is one of my favorite times of the week. It's the time I spend to you. This is a course in miracles, especially the hardcore course in miracles class on Thursdays. Especially here on Facebook Live, are especially geared toward, everybody's welcome to watch for sure. But the hardcore Course in Miracles class is especially geared toward active studying Course in Miracles students. People who don't mind taking advantage of my 38 years of facilitating a Course in Miracles. Because the Course in Miracles teaches that the purpose of a relationship is to save time. So this is not an analyzing a Course in Miracles class. What this is I am going to hear what this is saying. I mean, really hear it. And then we're going to do what it says to do. Our goal is to hear the message and use it. Not to analyze it, but to hear it and use it. And so tonight we're going to be in the Foundation for Inner Peace version of A Course in Miracles. And we're going to be on page 60. We're going to be on page 67 in the Course in Miracles Foundation for Inner Peace version, page 67, and the section is called The Rewards of God, section 6, chapter 4, section 6, The Rewards of God, on page 67. And I would appreciate it if you would pass that information on to people who come online and want to know where we're located. I'd love it if you would let them know where we're located. Remember, you don't have to believe these ideas. The Course in Miracles says that if you really want to learn A Course in Miracles, this is the way you learn A Course in Miracles. A Course in Miracles is not learned the way most books are learned. It says the number one rule is you need not believe these ideas. You need not accept these ideas. You need not even welcome these ideas. Some of these ideas in A Course in Miracles are going to be hard to believe. Some of these ideas are going to be hard to believe. Some of these ideas in A Course in Miracles are going to be quite startling. You are not asked to analyze and judge the ideas at all. This is not an analyzation session. This is not a judgment session, because the Course in Miracles teaches that if you use the ideas, if you apply the ideas, the Course in Miracles says, do you know what it says? It says the use of the ideas, using the ideas, will give the ideas meaning to you. It's using the course that makes the course mean something to you. If you really want the course to mean something to you, It's using the ideas in the course. It says the use of the ideas will give you and give them the ideas meaning to you and will show you. The Course in Miracles says the ideas in the Course in Miracles will show you that the ideas in the Course in Miracles are true. Using the ideas, it says the ideas will show you that the ideas are true. Didn't say you had to show yourself that the ideas are true. It didn't say I had to show you that the ideas are true. A Course in Miracles says, no, if you use the ideas will show you that the ideas are true. So that's where we're going to go. So I'm going to start, and you know that hardcore Course in Miracles, we go slowly because that's what Master Jesus, the author of the Course, is telling us to do. The Course in Miracles is channel material that came through someone to deliver a message to us. The first thing we want to do is we want to use another Course in Miracles definition of the term ego, so that that term does not seem so abstract. The Course in Miracles gives several definitions for the ego, but I'm going to use the definition from the Course that is the fearful mind, or the frightened mind, or just the term fear. The Course in Miracles says ego is just another term for the part of the mind that's afraid, the fearful mind, the fearful person, a fearful thought. So what is the ego? The ego is a fearful mind. The ego is a frightened mind. The ego is the fearful part of the mind. The ego is the part of the mind that believes it is separate. So the part of me that thinks I'm separate from you, that is the ego, part of the mind. The part of you that thinks you are separate and different from me, that is the ego. That is the ego from A Course in Miracles perspective. A Course in Miracles has its own definitions of terms. So it's not talking about the regular way people think of ego in the world. When we say ego in A Course in Miracles, we're talking about the frightened part of the mind, the fearful mind. So the first sentence says, the ego does not recognize the real source of threat. And if you associate yourself with the ego, if you associate yourself with the frightened part of your mind, you do not understand what? The situation as the situation is. Remember our goal? What do we want to come out of this? We want to actually hear what it's saying, because the Course in Miracles students know that you can read something in the Course and just seem to forget everything you've just read. So I'm going to go slow enough for us to hear the message together. The frightened part of the mind, the ego, doesn't recognize the real source of threat, which means if you associate yourself with your fearful thoughts, then that means you don't understand the situation as the situation is. So what is it that you don't understand about the situation as the situation is? Only your allegiance to it, only your allegiance to the ego, only your allegiance to the ego, only your allegiance to your fear gives the fear any power over you. The Course in Miracles just told us what it is that gives our ego any power over us. Would you like to know how to keep your ego from having any kind of power over you? Would you like to know how to keep your fear or your anger or your guilt, which is all other terms for the ego? Would you like to know how to keep your anger or fear or guilt or ego from having any control over you? Well, this sentence says it. It says, only your allegiance to it gives the ego any power. The only thing that gives your fear any power over you is your allegiance to it. That means your loyalty to your fearful thoughts, your angry thoughts, your depressing or guilty or lack thoughts, or your illness thoughts. What gives it power over you, according to A Course in Miracles? Your loyalty to it. You have to stop being loyal to your ego. If you don't want your ego to have any power over you, you have to stop being loyal to your ego. So how do you keep your fear from having any kind of power over you? How do I keep my fear or anger or upset from having any power over me? I have to stop being loyal to the ego. I have to stop being loyal to my wrong-banded thinking. So in order to keep your ego from having any power over you, you have to let go of your allegiance to it. Stop being loyal to your ego. Stop being loyal to your old ways of thinking. Stop being loyal to the ways of thinking and believing that we've learned from the world since the time we were born. It is time for you to stop being loyal to the world. It's time for you to stop being loyal to your ego. Tonight, make the decision that you're no longer going to be loyal to your ego. I am no longer going to be loyal to fear. I am no longer going to be loyal to the ego. I am no longer going to be loyal to my ego. Say it in whatever way that sounds natural for you. I'm not going to be loyal to my ego anymore. I'm willing to stop being loyal to my fear. I'm willing to stop being loyal to my fear. I'm willing to stop being loyal to guilt. I am willing to stop being loyal to anything that hurts me. That is the same as saying, I'm no longer going to have allegiance to my ego. And if I have no allegiance to my ego, then my ego will have no power over me. If I don't have any loyalty to my fear, if I'm not loyal to my upset, then my upset will not have any power over me. So do you see that just in the first two sentences, just in the very first two sentences, we were told how to prevent our ego from having any power over us. Then the first two sentences of the paragraph just told us how to not allow our ego to have any power over us. And how does our ego have any power over us? It's because we're loyal to it. We're loyal to our thinking. We're loyal to our beliefs, even if they aren't true. The Course in Miracles is saying, people are loyal to their beliefs, even if their beliefs aren't even true. People are loyal to their fear and their anger, and that's what gives them the fear and the anger power over a person, is that the person is loyal to error thinking. The average person is loyal to their anger, to their upset, to their projection, to their blame. And that gives it power over them. Jesus says, I have spoken of the ego. I've spoken of the ego as if it were a separate thing. Do you notice when you're studying the Course that the Course almost talks about the ego as if it's some type of a separate entity, almost like the ego is this external person or thing. The Course in Miracles says, I have spoken of the ego as if it was a separate thing. And what is a separate thing? A separate thing is anything that can act on its own. So I have been speaking of the ego as if it was a separate thing, acting on its own. So why was it necessary for A Course in Miracles to talk about the ego as if it was a separate thing acting on its own? Well, the Course in Miracles talks about the ego as if it's a separate thing acting on its own. This was necessary. It was necessary to persuade you. I talk about the ego as if it was a thing acting on its own because it's necessary to persuade who? To persuade you. But persuade you of what? That you cannot dismiss the ego lightly. You can't dismiss the ego lightly. You cannot dismiss your fear lightly. You cannot dismiss your fear lightly. You cannot dismiss the ego lightly. So what did the Course just tell us? Well, the first thing that the Course told us was that the ego doesn't have any more power over us than the allegiance that we have to the ego. Then the Course in Miracles told us that it speaks of the ego as if it was a separate thing acting on its own, because the Course says you cannot dismiss the ego lightly. I don't want you to dismiss the ego lightly. I want you to really take a look at the whole concept of ego. I really want you to really look closely at the Course in Miracles concept of the ego. It says you cannot dismiss it lightly, and must realize that much of your thinking is ego directed. Much of your thinking is fear directed, separation directed. So why is it that the Course in Miracles says that it talks about the ego as if it was a separate thing acting on its own? Because the Course in Miracles is saying to us, you all better not dismiss the ego lightly. You can't dismiss your fear, anger, upset, separation from God lightly. You have to realize what? You need to realize that much of your thinking is directed by your ego. You need to realize that much of your thinking is directed by your ego. Tonight, make the realization that much of your thinking is directed by your fear. Much of your thinking is directed by your past learnings. Much of your thinking is directed by your ego. Your ego is directing a whole lot of your thinking is being directed by the ego. Tonight, in Hardcore Course in Miracles, realize that much of your thinking is ego directed. Much of your thinking is ego directed. Much of your thinking is directed by the belief that you're separate. Much of your thinking is directed by your fear. Much of your thinking is directed by the thought that you are a body. Much of your thinking is directed by the idea that you are a body. Much of your thinking is directed by the idea that you are afraid in some way. Much of your thinking is ego directed. That's what the Course in Miracles means by that. That your thinking, a whole lot of your thinking is directed by your past learning, your era learning, the world's teaching. Realize that most of the things, a lot of the things you believe, you learned from the world. A lot of the things you believe were based on fear. You recognize that your thinking is directed more by fear than you think it is. Okay? The Course in Miracles says, read me slowly. Read me slowly. Why is it that you cannot dismiss your ego lightly? Why is it that you can't dismiss your ego lightly? Because you need to realize that a lot of your thinking is directed by fear-based people. You learned a lot of things through fear-based people. It's a possibility that your parents or whoever raised you were people who were could have been very kind and loving. but they also taught you a lot of fear-based thinking. They could have meant well, but it's a possibility that a lot of your thinking is directed by the world, by fear. But we can't safely let it go at that. We can't safely let it go at much of your ego. The ego directs a lot of your thinking. You can't dismiss it lightly. I know I talk to you as if your ego was almost like a separate thing acting on its own. I want you to remember that the only thing that gives your fear any power over you is your allegiance to it, your loyalty to it. So the Course in Miracles says we cannot safely let it go at that. However, or if we leave it at a lot of your thinking is ego directed, then you will regard yourself as necessarily conflicted. If you just only focus in on your ego and the idea that the ego is something that seems like it's separate from you acting on its own, if you only focus on the fact that you can't dismiss the ego lightly, if you just focus on the fact that much of your thinking is directed by your ego, if we leave it at that, you're going to stay in conflict as long as you are here. Or another way to put it is as long as you believe you are here, you're going to be in conflict if we just leave it at you got an ego and most of your thinking is directed by your ego. If we leave it at that, it's going to leave you in conflict and you're going to stay in conflict. One of the things that's really interesting that I would like to ask you to think about is that most of your thinking is directed by you. Most of your thinking is directed by you. Most of your thinking is directed by, really all of it ultimately, but much of your thinking is directed by fear and is based in fear. But if you recognize that, which is an important step, but then we leave it at that, then you're going to feel like you're in conflict according to the Course as long as you're here. But what that's telling you is that your conflict, do you know that your conflict is not being caused by what or who you think your conflict is being caused by? Do you know that you don't really see the real source of threat? Do you know that you are being fooled about what's really causing your pain or causing your upset? That the Course in Miracles says you do not recognize the real cause of threat. You don't really recognize the real source of threat. And what did it tell us that the real source of threat is? It told us that the real source of threat is your allegiance to your ego. Your allegiance to your ego is the real source of threat. You are being loyal to your old ways of believing and thinking and looking at things. That's the ego. That's the real source of threat. Your loyalty to your ego, to your little self, your loyalty to your little separate self. That's what gives that little separate self power over you. Is because you are a greater self, but you're letting your little self direct your life. Much of your thinking is directed by your little self. The little self. And you can't take that little self lightly. Much of your thinking is directed by the little self, which is the ego. But if you just realize that most of your problems are coming from your little self, the ego, and we stop at that, then you're going to stay in conflict. You're going to stay in conflict as long as you think you're here. So we've got to go further. We've got to go deeper. This is just the first paragraph. This is just the first paragraph. Do you hear how much we've gotten? And it's just the first paragraph. And we haven't even finished the first paragraph. I have been loving this material for almost 40 years. I have been studying it every day for almost 40 years. And it still blows my mind with how true it is, how many miracles it brings in my life, but also how it gets me out of denial. And I have to tell the truth about my own ego. I love A Course in Miracles. And I love A Course in Miracles students. I love it because A Course in Miracles student, somebody that's willing to challenge all of their beliefs, question all of their beliefs, that's an incredibly beautiful, powerful soul. And so I want you to know that it's an honor. It's a total honor to be a facilitator of A Course in Miracles for you and with you. Thank you for being my saviors, my brothers and sisters in God and love. I love how A Course in Miracles, that's right, Dana, A Course in Miracles cuts through the BS. Okay, so let's go to the next part of this paragraph. The Course in Miracles, would you like to have a definition of the ego? A very strong, very clear definition of the ego. I'm going to give you a very strong, very clear definition of the ego. Let me make sure I can get you all up so that I can be watching your comments and responding to your comments. I'm about to give you the definition of the ego. The ego is nothing more than a part of your belief about yourself. The ego is a part of your belief. So what is the ego? A part of your belief. A part of your belief about what? The ego is a part of your belief about yourself. The ego is a part of your belief about yourself. Yeah, I'm getting this up so I can watch your comments while I'm teaching. Okay. So, what is the ego? The ego is a part of your belief about yourself. So when you say my ego, what you're saying is, my belief about myself made me angry. My belief about myself made me sad. My belief about myself made me afraid. My belief about myself made me happy. My belief about myself made me excited. The ego is just a part of your belief about yourself. The ego, so when we say ego, we don't want that to be something abstract anymore, right? So the Course in Miracles says the ego is part of your belief about yourself. It's what you believe about yourself. What is my ego? My ego is part of what I believe about myself. Say it to yourself. My ego is part of my belief about myself. My ego is part of my belief about myself. My ego is part of my belief about myself. My ego is part of my belief about myself. My ego is my belief about myself. My ego is part of the belief I have about myself. So the ego is nothing but a part of the belief that a person has about themselves. The ego is nothing but the belief that you have about yourself. Whatever belief that you have about yourself that's based on any kind of fear, any kind of separation, that part of your belief about yourself, that is the ego. So when you say my ego made me do it, you're saying my belief about myself made me do this. My belief about myself made me act that way. My belief about myself made me feel this way. The ego is nothing more than what? A part of your belief. About who? It's part of your belief about you. Your ego is what you believe about you. Your ego is what you believe about you. And what you believe about you is going to tell you what to do. What you believe about you is going to tell you what to do. What you believe about you is going to tell you what to do. What you believe about you is going to tell you what to do. What you believe about you is going to tell you what to do. what you believe about you. It's going to tell you what to do. What you believe about you is going to tell you what to do. What you believe about you is going to tell you what to do. That is your ego. Your ego is whatever you believe about yourself. Your ego is what you believe about you. The Course in Miracles says the ego is nothing more than a part of your belief about yourself. And what else has been going on? Your other life. What? Did the Course in Miracles, did it just tell me that I have another life? Yeah, it says your other life. The life that you're living that's not full of fear, the life that you're living that is totally full of love, the life that you are living that is united with God, the life that you are living in which you are totally free, your other life has continued without interruption. Your loving life has continued without interruption while you have detoured into your fearful life, or the life that looks like fear can be real. I was looking at a movie the other day, what most people would call a horror movie, but I see lessons in everything. And it was called The Quiet Place. And basically the movie was based on the premise that there were these aliens that had taken over the earth. And they could only destroy you if you made noise, if you were making sounds, if you were making noise. And to me, that's a great way of looking at the ego. It's like the ego only gets you if you're making noise, if you're talking stuff and telling yourself stuff and believing stuff that doesn't make any sense. When you're projecting, when you're blaming, when you're not taking responsibility, when you're seeing yourself as a victim, you're just making noise. And then the alien, the ego, looks like it can get you and destroy you. Why? Because you're just making noise. You're not saying anything that's based on the truth sometimes, or you may be telling yourself fearful things or depressing things or angry things. That's making the noise that allows the alien to come get you. So in the movie, they were only safe based on how quiet that they were. So think about that and how that relates on a spiritual level. It's when we go within and we're quiet. It's when we don't have conflict, inner conflict, which is the same as noise. That's when we're safe. And A Course in Miracles really teaches us in a very beautiful way how in the heck to be quiet. The Course in Miracles is the real meaning of being quiet, because if you are applying the ideas in A Course in Miracles, then you are quiet, because you are the one that came up with the ideas that are based on fear and separation. So if you're listening to the Holy Spirit, if you're listening to the loving mind inside of you, you are actually quiet. You're being quiet, and you're letting God's thoughts and love's thoughts do its thing. So the quiet mind is the sane mind, where the monsters don't frighten us. That is exactly the way I see it also, CJ. So let's take that sentence again. Your other life, okay? So even while a person is in conflict, they have another part of themselves that is continuing to be loving without interruption. And there's a part of you, your other life has been, and your other life has always been and always will be what? Your real self will always be totally unaffected by your attempts to dissociate it. No matter how much you try to separate yourself from how loving you are, no matter how much you try to separate yourself from how innocent you are, the part of you that is innocent, the part of you that is loving, is totally unaffected by your attempts to separate yourself from it. The part of you that's spectacular, the part of you that's sensational, it's still connected to you no matter how much you try to separate yourself from it. So how do you separate yourself? from your loving, bountiful, happy self? How does a person separate themselves from their happy selves? Well, the Course in Miracles says you separate yourself from your happy self by being loyal to your ego, by being loyal to your fears, by being loyal to the old ways that you've learned to look at things, by being loyal to the part of yourself that believes that you're separate and believes that you're just a person. How do you try to separate yourself from your divine self? You try to separate yourself through your divine. A person tries to separate themselves from their divine selves by using erroneous beliefs about themselves. So as long as you keep believing what is not true, and what is not true is that you're guilty or sinful or bad or separate from God, those things are not true. As long as you continue to believe things that are not true, don't you know that that means you're still being loyal to your ego? And if you're loyal to your ego, you will be full of fear and conflict. But even if you're full of fear and conflict, even if you are unhappy about something right now, you have another life, a life that you are completely one, a life that you are completely joined with God. That life is still continuing without interruption, and it's totally unaffected by any of your fearful negative thoughts about anything. So there's a part of you that is utterly unaffected by anything that your ego tries to do. Okay, so let's look at a few of the comments. CJ says, I will always fail at separating from love. Yes. Diana says that basically it's moving so fast, it's hard for me to read all of it. Well, anyway, thank you for sharing what you shared, Diana. Tracy says loyalty to the ego. That's right. It's loyalty to the ego. It's loyalty to the ego that gives the ego power over you. Diana says, I no longer pledge allegiance to erroneous thoughts. I no longer pledge allegiance to the erroneous thoughts of America. I no longer pledge allegiance to the erroneous thoughts of America or of myself. Alita says, I will not believe those things that are not true. That not having loyalty, no longer being loyal to the ego means no longer believing in things that are not true. No longer having loyalty to the ego means you're no longer going to believe in what is not true. You're going to start using what the Course in Miracles is teaching you as your belief system and as your thought system. You're going to use the new thought system. So no longer having loyalty to your ego would be you no longer using the world's ways of thinking, no longer using fear-based thinking. That would be how you are no longer loyal to the ego. You're no longer being loyal to fear. Fran says, I want to join with my other life. That's a beautiful affirmation, France. I want to join with my other life, my loving life. I want to join with my loving life. I want to join with my loving life. I want to join with my loving life. And Diana says, yes, we're talking about a new thought system. Thank you for making comments. Thank you for taking advantage of the fact that we're alive and we can communicate with each other. Take a moment to share this broadcast on your timeline. Share these broadcasts. Thank you for sharing these broadcasts. Would you mind doing that much for our purpose and for our cause of bringing light to the planet? Would you be willing to just share the broadcast on your timeline? Okay, let's look. That was one paragraph. That was one paragraph. That was one paragraph. And what did that one paragraph tell us? That one paragraph told us that most people, that people don't know the real cause of threat. And if you associate yourself with your fear, if you associate yourself with your anger thoughts, then it says you won't understand the situation that you're in. Then we were told that the only thing that gives your ego any power over you is your loyalty to it, to your allegiance to it. Then we were told that the Course is always talking about the ego as if it's a separate thing acting on its own. And the Course is talking about the ego as if it's a separate thing acting on its own, so that you won't dismiss your ego, your fear thoughts lightly. It says, do you know that you need to recognize how much of your thinking is directed by you and by your old belief system? You don't realize how much of your thinking is being directed by fear. Then we were told that if we just stop at knowing that our thinking is ego directed, that we will be in conflict, and that we will be in conflict as long as we're here, as long as we think we're here. Then that first paragraph told us that when we say the ego, we're just talking about the beliefs that you have about yourself that are not true. Your ego is just the beliefs you have about yourself that have been directed by the world that are not true. Then you were told that you have a real life, you have a real self, you have a really loving, powerful self that has continued to exist, that has continued to do its thing, and is never affected by any of the stuff that you are going through as far as the conflict that you're going through. The conflict that you're going through or any fear that you go through doesn't have any effect on your real self at all. Your real self is never affected by anything the ego does. Your real self is never affected by anything your fear does or your fear thinks or your fear believes. Okay, that's so. Let's go on to paragraph 2. We in chapter 4, section 6, paragraph 2 in A Course in Miracles in the Foundation for Inner Peace version. Take a breath with me. Take a breath. Let's take another breath. Thank you for taking part in Hardcore Course in Miracles. I've been asking the Holy Spirit to send the students and my teachers. You're my students and you're my teachers. I've been asking the Holy Spirit to send those to me who would benefit the most through me and by the way that I teach and share. And I'm so thankful that you are here and that you resonate with the way that the truth in the Course in Miracles comes through me, because I'm here for the people who resonate with me. In learning to escape from illusions, and an illusion is a false idea. So the Course in Miracles defines an illusion, one of its definitions of illusion is a false idea. You hear people often who are studying A Course in Miracles, I've heard it many times over the past 38 years. Oh, this is just an illusion. Oh, this is all just an illusion. And most of the time, the person saying that doesn't know what they're talking about. They don't really know what the Course in Miracles definition of an illusion is. And an illusion, the Course in Miracles says an illusion is a false idea that you want to believe is true, so much that you try to make it true, even if it's not. Did you hear what I said? The Course in Miracles says an illusion is a false idea that you want to believe is true, so much that you try to make it true, even if it's not. So in learning to escape from false ideas that you want to be true, even if they're not, how do you escape from your ego, which is an illusion? How do you escape from your fears? How do you escape from your upsets? The Course in Miracles is about to answer that. So enable you to escape from your problems, what would it enable you to escape from your problems that have already, your one problem that has already been solved? In order to learn how to escape from illusions, in order to learn how to escape from fear, what is it you must remember? Well, in learning to escape from illusions, your debt to your brother. Now, the Course in Miracles defines brother as a man. One of the definitions, because it gives lots of definitions. One definition for brother is a man that is joined with yours. A man that is joined with mine. That's brother. The term brother doesn't have anything to do with gender. The term brother doesn't have anything ultimately to do with sex. It means a mind that is joined with mine. So in learning to escape from illusions, your debt to your brother, the mind that is joined with yours, that's you, is something you must never forget. What is it that you must never forget? The debt you owe to others. Don't forget the debt you owe to someone else, what appears to be someone else. Because the same debt you owe to your brother, the same debt you owe to someone else, to the mind that's joined with yours, the same debt you owe to your brother is the same debt you owe to Jesus, according to the Course in Miracles. You know, the Jesus of a Course. I call this Jesus the Jesus of the Course, because this Jesus is very much a totally unconditionally loving Jesus, unlike the one that I learned about when I was a kid. And the purpose of the Course is to also correct our perception of Jesus so that we will not feel any kind of fear, resistance, contraction, or upset around the idea of Jesus or the word Jesus. If you are feeling contraction or upset around the word Jesus, then you know that your thinking about Jesus is being directed by your ego, because it's only your ego that makes you feel fear and upset. It's only your ego that makes you feel contraction and upset. It's only your ego that keeps you from feeling anything other than fear. It's your ego that keeps you from feeling anything other than love. Excuse me. It's your ego that keeps you feeling anything other than love. So, there are two things if you want to escape from pain. There are two things if you want to escape from illusion that you need to do. If you want to escape from any form of fear or upset, do you know that there are two things that you need to do? You must never forget that you owe a debt. You owe a debt to everyone. You owe a debt to your brother. The next thing, that if you want to be free of any lack, pain, fear, or illusion, the next thing that a person would need to remember is that the same debt, which is the debt of seeing correctly and giving love and appreciation to you, I owe that same debt to Jesus. I need to see Jesus from a place of love, correct perception, and forgiveness. And then I need to see you from a perspective of love, correct perception, and appreciation if I want to escape from fear. If I want to get away from illusion and fear, there are two things I need to do. I need to remember the debt I owe to you and the debt I owe to Jesus. You need to remember the debt you owe to me and everyone else and the debt you owe to Jesus. Whenever you act egotistically with great ego self-importance toward another, whenever you act fearfully or angrily towards another, what's really happening? When you're acting angry, when you're acting upset, what's really happening? I'm going to tell you. Would you like to know? Whenever you're angry, I'm going to tell you what's really happening. Whenever you're angry, I'm going to tell you what's really happening. What's really happening, whenever you're angry, whenever you're acting egotistically towards another, you are throwing away the graciousness. Every time I'm going off on somebody about something, and I'm always upset about something because they are not acting out my script. The Course in Miracles says every time a person is upset about anything, they're upset because something or someone isn't acting out their script. no matter what it is. He says, well, when you're acting egotistically towards another, you're throwing away the graciousness of your indebtedness and the healing, loving perception that it would produce. Me recognizing that I only owe you love, I only owe you correct perception of you, I owe you peace. That's what I need to remember, is that I only owe you appreciation. Love is full appreciation according to A Course in Miracles. Love is nothing but full appreciation. I owe you full appreciation. I owe Jesus full appreciation. If I remember that I owe you appreciation and I owe Jesus appreciation, then I would have a holy perception. What is a holy perception? A holy perception is a loving perception. A holy perception is a freeing perception. A holy perception is a sane perception. So how do you have sane perceptions? You simply remember you have a debt to pay. You have a debt to pay to everyone around you, and you have a debt to pay to Jesus. What is that debt? That debt is to give and receive love. What is love? According to A Course in Miracles. According to A Course in Miracles, love is full appreciation. So what is it that I owe you? I owe you full, complete appreciation. What is it that you owe me that you must never forget that you owe me and our brother Jesus? Full appreciation. Full appreciation. If you fully appreciate me, if you fully appreciate Jesus, if you fully appreciate your brother, then it will produce a loving, holy, sane perception. And the term holy, we want to talk about that term holy. That term holy used to kind of get next to me when I first started to study the Course. It would sound like, holy. I don't know, something about that I made myself feel uncomfortable about. But I've learned that the Course in Miracles has its own definition for every term in the book. So, and there are many definitions. One definition of holy is loving. Another definition of holy is sane. Another definition of holy is innocent. So wherever you see, mostly I use the word innocent. Whenever I see the word holy, I substitute the Course in Miracles definition of holy as innocent. So the term holy can be used right here. Why can you use the term holy? Because as you learn what? How much you are indebted. You need to learn you have a debt to pay. You have a debt to pay. It's a very easy, beautiful, wonderful debt to pay. But don't forget, you have a debt to pay. You owe me. You owe me, and I owe you. And we both owe Jesus. That's right. We both owe Jesus. That's right. And thank God Jesus doesn't have a collection agency, or we'd be in big trouble. But we owe Jesus. We owe Jesus. We owe Jesus full appreciation. We owe each other full appreciation. You owe yourself full appreciation. So doggone right. You still have a debt, and I still have a debt. And that debt is what we must remember. It says, as you learn how much you are indebted to the whole sonship. And another term for sonship is the family of God. The sonship is the family of God, which is the family of love. God is love. God is love. So another term for God is love. The sonship is the family of love, the family of God, the love family. We are the love family. We are the family of love. We are the mighty companions, the family of love. We are the mighty companions, the family of love. We are a love family. So it says, as you learn how much you are indebted to the whole family of God, which includes me, Jesus. Then it says, when you realize how indebted you are to everybody, then you come as close to knowledge as perception can. Perception and knowledge is not the same thing. What you perceive and what you know can be two different things. Knowledge and perception are two different things. Knowledge is beyond perception. It doesn't have anything to do with belief at all. Knowledge is absolute certainty. The Course defines knowledge. One of the definitions of knowledge in A Course in Miracles is absolute certainty. So absolute certainty is never what perception is, because perception changes. So since perception changes, perception cannot be absolutely certain. Okay, so when you remember that you owe me full appreciation, when I remember that I owe you full appreciation, and when we remember that we owe everyone full appreciation, when we remember that we owe Jesus full appreciation, then you come as close to having knowledge, real knowledge, as you can in the world of perception. And when you recognize that you owe everyone appreciation, the gap is then so small that knowledge can easily flow across the gap of unawareness and obliterate perception and unawareness forever. So do you know that all you have to do is remember that you owe a debt to your brothers, to me, and to Jesus? And if you really remember that that only debt is full appreciation, then the gap between the knowledge of God and your perception, that gap between you and that other self, that gap between you and true love, will be obliterated forever, will be obliterated forever. Now, Jesus says, you have very little trust in me yet. As yet you don't really trust me yet. Jesus is saying, you don't really trust me yet. You don't really trust me yet. Jesus is saying in the Course in Miracles right here, says, you have what kind of trust? He says, you have very little trust. You have very little trust in me. And I could say that for some people that are listening right now relative to me. I could say to some people maybe watching me that you have very little trust in me as yet. There may be people out there that are suspicious of me. So you have very little trust in me as yet. But your trust in Jesus, your trust in me will increase. What will cause your trust to increase? As you turn more and more often to me, Jesus, love, instead of to your ego, which is fear, for guidance. So how do you develop trust with Jesus? How do you develop trust with anybody? He says, well, the trust in anybody, not just Jesus, but the trust in anybody will increase as you turn more and more often to your love for guidance. See, if you let love guide you, you're going to trust me more and more and more. When you let truth guide you, you're going to trust me more and more and more. As you let the truth guide you, then you will trust another person more and more and more. So did you just see how the Course in Miracles just told us how to develop trust in each other? It says, just admit you may have very little trust in me. There's a part of me that may have very little trust in you. There's a part of you that may have very little trust in me. There's a part of you that may have very little trust in me. There may be a part of you that doesn't trust me that much. There may be a part of me that doesn't trust you that much. There may be a part of me that doesn't trust someone that much. There may be a part of me that doesn't trust someone that much. So how do I get the trust to increase? How does a person get their trust to increase? Well, your trust is going to increase. Trust is going to increase as I turn more and more often to love instead of fear for guidance. Turn to love instead of fear for guidance. And then your trust in the other will increase. If you don't trust me yet, if you're suspicious of me, how do you get past that suspicion of me? Well, you turn more and more to your spirit, to the truth, to the love in you. You turn more and more to Jesus also, our elder brother, instead of your ego. What is your ego? Part of those beliefs about yourself that make you feel afraid. The ego is part of your belief about yourself that keeps you insecure or angry. If you don't turn to that part of yourself for guidance, then your trust in everyone will increase, and that trust will be proven to be the right thing to do and the best thing to do. In other words, the results from turning to love instead of turning to fear for guidance, it's the results that are going to convince you. As you begin to turn more and more to what the Course in Miracles teaches you, instead of what the world has taught you for guidance, the results are going to convince you that this choice is the only sane choice that you can make. So what is the only sane choice that a person can make? The only sane choice that a person can make is to choose to turn more and more often to Jesus, to love, to truth, instead of their own ego, their own fear, their own past learning for guidance. Stop turning to your ego for guidance. Stop letting your fear guide you. Stop letting your upset guide you. Stop letting your conflicts guide you. Stop letting your worries guide you. If you don't let those things guide you, if you do not let those things guide you, then your trust will increase. Your trust in the truth, your trust in love, your trust in Jesus, your trust in all of your brothers and sisters, that trust will increase as you turn more often to love instead of to fear for guidance. The results will convince you. Do you know that the results will convince you increasingly? The benefits of turning to love rather than to fear for guidance, the benefit from turning to the Holy Spirit as opposed to the ego for guidance, the benefits of turning to the truth instead of to illusions in your mind for guidance, the results will increasingly convince you that this choice, the choice for love, the choice for love, the choice for truth, the choice for Jesus, the choice for God, that's the only sane choice you can make. There's just one sane choice you can make, and that's the choice for God. That's the choice for love. That's the choice for oneness. Do you realize that no one who learns from experience, no one who learns from experience that one choice brings peace and joy, while another choice brings chaos and disaster, needs additional convincing? So who is it that does not need additional convincing? It's the person that's learned that choosing for God, choosing for truth gives you peace and joy. Choosing for what the world teaches, choosing for fear brings you chaos and disaster. The ones you learn that listening to your ego is only going to bring you chaos and disaster, and listening to your loving self, God and truth and spirit, is going to bring you peace and joy, then you're not going to need any additional convincing. When you really have the experience of watching, practicing the Course, bringing you more peace and joy, and not practicing the Course, bringing you more chaos and disaster, then you're not going to be somebody who needs additional convincing. A person who needs to be convinced is a person who hasn't learned from experience that one choice brings love and the other choice brings fear. The person who hasn't learned that you can make a choice that brings love and you can make a choice that brings fear. The person that hasn't learned that is the person that's always needing to be convinced. So the person who needs to be convinced about what it is that I've shared, the person that needs to be convinced about what I'm sharing and the truth of what I'm sharing, this is a person who has not learned from experience that one choice brings peace and joy and the other choice brings disaster and chaos. That's just a person who hasn't learned from their experience yet. But what is the most effective way to learn? What would the Course in Miracles say is the most effective way to learn? A Course in Miracles says, but the most effective way to learn is through rewards. The most effective way to learn is through receiving rewards at the level of consciousness that we're on right now. You will reach a level of consciousness that rewards has nothing to do with it. But there is a stage where, just like, your pet, how you give them a treat. As soon as they learn something, you give them a treat. Well, when we learn A Course in Miracles and use the ideas, we're going to be given the ultimate treat, the treat of unconditional joy, love, and happiness that never ends and only expands. So learning through rewards is a much more effective way of learning than learning through pain. The best way to learn is not through pain. The most effective way to learn is not through pain. Pain is not the most effective way to learn. Pain isn't the most effective way to learn. Learning through rewards, learning through love, learning through joy, that's the most effective way to learn. You can learn through pain, but because you can learn through any experience. But if you're learning through pain, then that means that there's a choice that you're making that you might want to reconsider. Pain means you're making a wrong choice because you don't have to have the pain to have the learning. You can learn through rewards. You don't have to learn through pain. Mighty companion. It's much more effective for you to learn through rewards. So claim right now, I am willing to learn through rewards. 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 So why is it that it's more effective to learn through rewards? Why is it more effective to learn through rewards rather than learning through pain? Because pain is an ego illusion. So when you say, I am feeling pain, you should be recognizing that you're saying, I am feeling an ego illusion. If you're having pain in a relationship, go, I am feeling an ego illusion in my relationships. I am experiencing pain means I am experiencing an ego illusion, a fear-directed false idea. Remember that I said earlier that one of the definitions that the Course in Miracles gives of an illusion is that it is a false idea. And then it says an ego is just part of your belief about yourself. It's a fearful thought. It's a fear. It's a thought that's directed by fear. So that means that pain is a fear-directed false idea. So pain is a false idea directed by fear. Pain is a false idea directed by fear. Pain is a false idea directed by fear. Pain is an ego illusion. Pain is a fear illusion. Pain is an illusion of fear. Pain is an ego illusion. Learning through rewards is more effective than learning through pain. And pain, any lesson that you learn through pain, doesn't last. A lesson that you learn through guilt doesn't last. A lesson that you learn through anger and separation and attack, those lessons don't last. Like, you would think that all the lessons that people have learned down through the ages about the effects and results of war, you would think that it would have a permanent effect and we wouldn't be doing the same things over and over again that hurt us. But we were just told, if you learn something through pain, whatever you learn through pain is not going to last. Anything that you learn through pain is just going to produce a temporary effect. The lessons you learn through feeling guilty, those lessons, they just stick around temporarily before you probably do the same thing again. So why is it that a person goes through the same lessons over and over and over again and then forgets what they learned during that lesson? It's because if you learn a lesson through pain, then you're going to only have a temporary change. A painful lesson just produces a temporary result. A painful lesson just produces a temporary effect. But the rewards of God, the rewards that come from God, the rewards that come from the truth, the rewards that come from the course, those rewards are immediately recognized. Whenever you are receiving a love reward, you will always recognize a reward that comes to you from God immediately. Whenever you receive any kind of reward that's based on love, you recognize it immediately. Any lesson that you learn through love is a lesson that you recognize immediately. Any lesson that you learn through love, any reward that you get through love, any lesson that you learn through the truth, you will recognize the results of that lesson. You will recognize the effects of that lesson immediately. If you learn something through the ego, if you learn something through pain and suffering and anger, it's just going to have a temporary effect. You're going to get the lesson, but you're going to forget the lesson. You're going to get the lesson, and the lesson's going to fade, and you will find yourself doing the same thing over and over and over again. So a lesson that's learned through guilt and pain is not a lesson that has a lasting effect. A lesson that you learn through guilt and pain is not a lesson that has a lasting effect, but a lesson that comes from the rewards of God. Do you know that a lesson that comes from the rewards of truth, God, love, it says, those lessons are what? Immediately recognized as eternal. Is recognized as eternal. Anything that you learn from love is going to be an eternal lesson. It's going to be a lesson that has a permanent positive effect. Anything that you learn through love is going to be with you forever. Anything you learn through love and truth is going to be with you forever. Anything you learn through pain is going to have a temporary effect. And the recognition of love is made by you. It's the recognition of love is never made by your ego. Your ego, which is the fearful part of your mind, the fearful part of your mind never recognizes love. The fearful part of the mind never recognizes love. So the only part of you that can recognize love is your real self. And so the fact that you can recognize love, even though your ego can't recognize love, establishes that you and your ego cannot be identical. You and your fear are not identical. You are not your fear. You are not your fear. You are not your fear. You are not your anger. You are not your upset. You are not your past. You are not the past. You are not your past. That's what it means when it says you and your ego cannot be identical. You and your fearful thoughts cannot be identical. You are not your ego. You are not your ego. You are not the ego. You are capable of recognizing love. You are capable of recognizing good. You are capable of recognizing God. You are not your ego. You are not your fears. You are not your beliefs about yourself. You may experience your beliefs about yourself. You may see your beliefs about yourself, but you are not your beliefs about yourself. You can believe you're lacking. You can believe you're guilty. You can believe you're angry. You can believe that you're separate from God. You can believe anything, but it doesn't make those beliefs you. You are not your negative beliefs. You are not your negative thoughts. You are not what you call your negative feelings. You are not your ego. You are not your ego. You are not your confusion. You are not your worry. You are not your body. You are not separate. So the Course in Miracles says you and your ego cannot be identical. You may believe that you have already accepted this difference. You may believe you already think that you are not your ego. You may believe you already think that you are not your fear. But let me tell you something. You are by no means convinced as yet that you are not your ego. You're not by any means convinced that you are not guilty in some way. You're not by any means convinced that you don't have some kind of fear in some kind of way. You are not convinced that you are not a body that dies in some way. He says you are by no means convinced as yet that you are not your ego. I mean, Jesus is just straight up and say, you may think that you are not your ego. You may think that you're not your anger and your fear and your guilt, but nah, you are not by any means really convinced as yet. How do we know that you are not convinced that you are not your ego? The fact that you believe, what? Is what proves that you are not convinced you are not your ego. What is it that you believe that proves that you don't think you're different from your ego? The fact that you believe that you must escape from the ego shows that you are not convinced that you're not your ego. The fact that you think, I got to escape from my ego. I got to get rid of my ego. My ego is making me do this. My ego is making me do that. My fear is making me do this. My fear is making me do that. The fact that you believe you must escape from your fearful thoughts. The fact that you think you must escape from your thoughts of separation. The fact that you think you must escape from any kind of upset, fear, guilt, or anger. That is the ego. The fact that you think you need to escape your ego shows that you are not convinced that you are not your ego. But I'm going to give you some rules. I'm going to tell you, would you like to know how you cannot escape from your ego? Would you like to know how you can't escape from your ego? Would you like to know what you would have to do to make sure you never appear to escape from your ego? Okay, if you do this, it'll look like you never escape from your fear. If you do this, it'll look like you're never going to escape from your ego. Okay, listen carefully. Listen carefully. Listen carefully. You cannot escape from the ego. You can't escape from your fear. You can't escape from the ego by humbling the ego. You cannot escape from the ego by humbling it. By trying to be humble, you will not escape from your ego, your fear, your separation from God by trying to be humble. You can't escape from fear by trying to humble your fear. You can't escape from the ego by humbling it. You cannot escape from the ego by controlling the ego. Trying to control the ego will guarantee that you will not escape from the ego. Trying to control your ego will guarantee that you can't escape from the ego by controlling it. You cannot escape your fear by trying to control your fear. Stop trying to control your fear. Stop trying to control your anger. Stop trying to control your guilt. You will not control the ego. If you try to control the ego, you will not escape from the ego. You don't escape from the ego by controlling the ego, and you do not escape from the ego by punishing the ego. Punishing your little self will not get rid of your little self. Punishing your ego you will not be able to escape from your fear by punishing your ego. You cannot escape from the ego by punishing the ego. You escape from the ego by knowing you are not your ego. You don't escape from your ego by trying to humble your ego, control your ego, or punish your ego or yourself. You escape. Do you know that you escape from the ego by recognizing that you and your ego cannot be identical? You are not your fear. You are not your guilt. You are not a shabby, guilty, sad, insecure, victim person. That is not you. That is how you escape it. It's by recognizing that the ego is not you. So I'm going to give you some more information in the wrap up about how you escape the ego. Thank you for being here and making the incredible comments. I always read through all your comments. As a full-time teacher, I want to thank you. I want to ask you to make a financial expression of appreciation. Please make a financial expression of appreciation. Go to www.earlpurdy.com. earlpurdy.com. On May 12th, 2018, CJ, Carla Jean Adams, and I are going to do an revolutionary workshop called Share the Love. It is not a typical relationship workshop or seminar, I'm telling you, by any means. And it's going to be online as well as in person. So people have the option to attend in person or to watch it online. It will answer every question about relationships of all types and having peace in them and going to the next evolutionary level of relationship. We're going to be introducing a teaching that is based on a thought system that is totally in line with what we're teaching that we call Sporadika. So we are going to have an incredible relationship workshop, May 12th, 2018. There's a link that you're looking at on your screen. You can click that link and it'll take you straight to the registration and information about it at earlpurdy.com and cjadams.com. Go to my website and it has all kind of details and you can register. I'm excited about it. I'm available for one-on-one sessions, personal individual sessions called clarity sessions, where I use my knowledge of the Course in Miracles and other wisdom texts and sacred astrology and numerology for enlightenment and higher consciousness. I've been doing that for 40 years. So go to my website, check out clarity sessions, and you can work with me personally. On Thursdays, it's Hardcore Course, 7 p.m. Mountain Time. Sundays at 1 p.m. Mountain Time, A Course in Miracles. Tuesday, 7 p.m. Mountain Time, we do the Way of Mastery. You don't have to be a member of Facebook Live. Just go to www.facebook.com/Earl Purdy to watch the Facebook Live broadcast. share the video. Share the video. This workshop is blowing our minds as the Holy Spirit, the higher power, is giving it to CJ and I. Stuff we've never seen in any other workshops in terms of the approach. Share the love, May 12th, 2018. Okay, so let's complete now. I will say this again. I want you to hear this. If you don't hear anything else, I want you to hear this. Listen, listen, listen. You cannot escape from the ego by humbling it. You cannot escape from the ego by humbling it. You cannot escape from the ego by controlling the ego. You cannot escape from the ego by controlling the ego. Stop trying to control the ego. Stop punishing the ego. Stop trying to humble the ego. You cannot escape from fear, the fearful part of the mind. You can't escape the fearful part of the mind by humbling the mind, by trying to control your mind, by punishing your mind. That's not how you escape from the ego. This is how you escape from the ego. Remember that you and the ego are not identical. You and the ego are not identical. You and your ego are not identical. You're not the same thing. You are not your fear. You are not your fear. You are not your guilt. You are not your anger. You are not the danger. You are not in a depression. You are not in a lack. To escape the ego, don't identify with it. If you want to escape your ego fear, don't identify with it. Remember, learning through pain only produces a temporary result. Any lesson that you learn through pain is a lesson that you're going to forget. It's only the lessons of love that are permanent. It is only the lessons that you learn through joy and peace that are permanent. And remember that when you are experiencing a reward of God, when you are experiencing a reward of love, you will be able to immediately recognize that a reward of God, a reward of love is eternal. Any reward of God is eternal. Any reward that comes from truth lasts forever. But if you keep learning your lessons through pain and guilt and anger, then you're just learning your lessons in a way that's not going to last. Do you want your lessons to last so that you don't have to keep learning the lessons over and over again? Do you know that you would have to start letting yourself learn through joy, letting yourself learn through abundance, letting yourself learn through health and happiness and fun? If you want your lesson to last, learn your lesson through love and fun. If you want your lessons to last, learn your lessons through love and fun. If you want your lessons to last, learn your lessons through love. If you want your lessons to last, learn your lessons through love. If you want your lessons to last, learn your lessons through love. Stop being loyal to your ego. Stop being loyal to your ego. So listen to this over and over again. You all did incredible communication with each other. Kim, Diana, Shahira, CJ, Alita, all of you mighty companions online. Remember, you're a blessing. You and your ego. You and your fear. You and your ego are not identical. Stop trying to control your ego. Goodbye, pain. I choose to learn through love. Thank you, CJ, so much. I love you for narrating. I love all of you. Don't forget the debt. Don't forget the debt of full appreciation that you owe to others and to Jesus and to yourself. May the course be with you.